Nelson back at it again with a new episode of the Boy Time Podcast. And as always, I'm joined by Babby.
Mm.
Mm. I just realized that name choice was very bad, and I should have introduced myself as Little Dancing Man,
Mm.
but it's fine. I'm not going to redo it, and we're just going to roll with it. So I'm Leslie Nielsen forever. But anyways, we have a couple. We have a slam dunk episode. As always, we are continuing our Halloween marathon. I am watching George Romero movies. I watched Creepshow, and you are listening to albums, which we'll get to later. But yeah, so I went ahead. Not a whole lot of news this week, so we're just gonna jump right into movies. So I watched 2 anthology movies. I was going to watch 3, but then certain life circumstances came up and made that not possible. So we are going to be talking about Creepshow, the 1982 classic, and comparing that to Trick or Treat, a kind of modern horror anthology. And by modern, I mean over 15 years old because it came out in 2007. So sorry. But I guess we'll start with Creepshow. Creepshow is definitely, I think, more interesting to talk about. It's definitely the better anthology here. I don't know if that's super controversial. I know that Trick or Treat is a kind of a cult classic. Real horror heads are a big fan of Trick or Treat. But Creepshow, it's not the first horror anthology, but I think it's probably the most influential. Unfortunately, the people that took influence from it were um, like B movie horror people. Like I'm sure that the director of Hack O Lantern took a lot of direct influence from Creepshow, um, or maybe it's like kind of I don't know. We'll just get into it because Creepshow is directed by George Romero. All of the movies I'm going to be talking about are, and well, not Trick or Treat, but whatever. Directed by George Romero, screenplay by Stephen King, one of I think many projects that George Romero and Stephen King were working on. They were very tight during this time period, and I think through the 90s and 2000s, there were a number of Stephen King adaptations that George Romero tried to get funded, and then it just fell through. So I don't know how much else they've worked together, but this is their, I guess, most obvious connection. And Stephen King is actually in the movie. He plays one of the main characters in one of the stories. But I guess we'll get to it. But I think what really makes this movie special is the style of it. It's very different from every other George Romero movie. We talked about Day of the Dead last week, and by extension, the Dead trilogy. And those movies are very slow and methodical. Not a whole lot of like style put into the cinematography. A lot of the I guess story kind of comes together through editing, which George Romero mostly edited all of his movies himself. At least, the early stuff. So yeah, you take that and then you compare it to something like Creepshow, where for the most part, most of the time it's pretty straight, but then to kind of accent the horror imagery, the gruesome whatever special effects, then they throw on neon gel lights, so it'll be just like it was a normal day in the 80s or 70s or whatever, and then like someone's arm gets bitten off and then all of a sudden it's not lit like real life, it's like red and blue, and there's like cutout mats where it's like a comic explosion or something. It's very strange, but I think it's very effective, and this is why I say that it mostly inspired B movie people. is because that kind of became a trend after this movie came out. Was like, well, okay, well, Creepshow did the thing with like really neon red lights, so I'm just gonna light my scene with red lights without really understanding why the Creepshow, uh, whatever, why George Romero did that with Creepshow. Because he only did it sparingly. It isn't like entire scenes are lit like that. It's maybe once every 10-15 minutes that something like that happens, and in a I think it's like a 2-hour movie. Not a whole lot of it, but it's really memorable because it really stands out. So that's kind of where Creepshow's influence is. I don't think it really spawned a whole lot of other anthology movies, unlike Trick or Treat, which we'll get to. But I guess also kind of interesting in its production is it's definitely influenced by old EC comics, your Tales from the Crypt, those types of comics, which I did uh, kind of go into a little bit last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago. I don't remember. But I watched the Tales from the Crypt movie from the 70s. Not Demon Knight or Demon Warp or something. The actual Tales from the Crypt, or the Tales from the Crypt movie that is based on the show from the Crypt. But in the 70s, there was an old Tales from the Crypt movie. Not very good, but that probably has a pretty good shot at being one of the first horror anthologies. So that's something, I guess. Um, but yeah, Creepshow kind of based on the same thing. It's kind of, it's the same kind of vibe. I feel like those old comics, it's like, yes, a lot of them are like bad people doing bad things, and they maybe murder somebody or whatever. They screw someone out of some money or whatever, evil businessman, business, and then some horror monster exacts revenge or inflicts karmic justice upon our antagonist. And I think, pretty, it's fine, I guess. Kind of becomes formulaic after a while, which is, I think Creepshow kind of varies it up more than Details from the Crypt movie does, because it feels like that movie is like 5 short stories that are all the same. Creepshow feels very different. And I think a lot of that is due to obviously having a lot of Stephen King short stories that, that probably were also just inspired by the whatever the EC comics, but then there was just Stephen King stuff, and Stephen King uh, makes a lot of different types of stories. Very good author, and this is in his like peak Coke days, so that was when the good stuff was being made. So pretty good. But then I guess we'll get into the meat of the bish, I guess you could say. Um, And what I will say is that most of these horror anthologies, or really anthologies in general, will have a wraparound segment. So, if, for example, the Tales from the Crypt movie, basically, like 4 people are in a cave and they're trying to get out. And I guess all 4 of those people are the main characters in the short stories that we see. So we kind of see flashbacks to how they ended up here, and that's kind of the wraparound segment. There's little stuff like that where they're talking to the crypt keeper, and we get to find out their backstories. Um, Creepshow really doesn't have one. It starts out and it's just like this evil dad who steals a kid's Creepshow comic and throws it in the trash. And then the kid sees a skeleton, and then the skeleton laughs as if to insinuate that the skeleton is going to murder the father and get the comic book back to the child. But we never really see that happen. I don't think that's ever resolved at the end of the story. Um, Basically, in between each story, it's just like flipping the comic pages. But I guess the one thing that kind of ties together the wraparound segment is it's animated, 2D animation, hand drawn, looks great, especially for the time. It I don't well actually I don't know if great is the right word. I mean early 80s, take a look at like what Disney was doing at that time. While not fantastic, it looks better than what was going on here, but I guess, can't really hold them to the same standards. It does kind of look like a Saturday morning cartoon from that era, like the real Ghostbusters or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. A little bit better than that, but, in that same vein. So that's kind of the wraparound segment. Makes it kind of unique for a horror anthology. Um, so that's kind of interesting. But I guess we'll just go into the stories, and there's five. I think there's five of them. Um, five little short stories. And I think what's kind of interesting about these stories, I'm not going to go beat by beat through all of them because that's not worthwhile use of my time or your time. So we'll just kind of go into what makes each one effective, I guess, um, or not effective in some cases. So we'll start with the first one. I think that one is called Birthday Cake. This one is pretty straightforward. We have rich family. Our kind of audience surrogate is Ed Harris. Kind of interesting. Ed Harris is a very kind of serious, I don't want to say classical actor, but he's in a whole lot of stuff that is like not comedic. He plays bad guys in a lot of things. He just seems he has that face for like a perfect villain, but he plays kind of the main character in this kind of. Basically, he's married to the daughter of this rich family, and so he's basically like, "What's going on here? Can you drop some exposition? Just tell me what's going on. Why is this all happening?" Um, but it is kind of interesting. It's him when he's really young, uh, and he's acting really goofy. There's a scene where he dances and he's like doing this weird head nod thing. It's very odd. So it's an odd choice. It's definitely weird to see him in a role like that, but it's fine. But basically, this rich family every year on Father's Day, their great aunt drives to their estate, and their estate has a burial mound, like a family plot in their backyard or whatever on their land. And this old lady, who's definitely not played by someone in their 30s, drives to them, arrives exactly at 6 o'clock on the dot, and then basically gets drunk and talks to her dead father's grave because on Father's Day, she actually killed her father because her father was a horrible asshole who, frankly, I did not really feel any sympathy for him when we saw her cave his head in with an ashtray, which I guess is maybe something we'll talk about later because that ashtray appears in every single short. I don't really know why. It's only really important in this story, but it appears in every single one. And I know for a fact it also appears in every single one in Creepshow 2. And when Shudder got the rights to make a Creepshow TV show, they also include that ashtray and like most of the stories in that one. So I don't know why it's a running thing, but it is. So, and it all got started here on the birthday Father's Day cake. It's probably not birthday cake or whatever I said it was. Uh, anyways, but yeah, so she gets drunk and then chills at the grave, and then dad comes alive and kills everybody. Uh, wouldn't you believe it? That's what happens. Um, I think that this is the weakest one by far. It definitely feels the most like an old EC Comics Creepshow, whatever. Uh, and honestly, it's not really a style that I really like. None of the characters are likable. This one, it might be the shortest because it feels only like it's like 10 minutes or something. So, in and out. I will say this the special effects were also done by an old friend of the podcast, Frank Ziti,
That's
uh,
cool.
everybody's favorite special effects artist from this time, aka Tom Savini. Whatever. I don't remember when I started calling him that, but it was a long time ago. Um, and Frank Ziti actually does appear in this. I forget which story he's in, but when I saw him, I'm like, yay! I love Frank Ziti. He just always shows up in these George Romero movies, and I'm a big fan. But yeah, I will say that Frank Ziti's special effects and everything are great as always. I don't think they quite compare to Day of the Dead. I don't know if I gave him credit last week, and I definitely should have, because that is probably his best movie special effects wise. Like the zombies in that are crazy good. I don't know how they got them to look like that. Um, Obviously, Creepshow does not quite live up to that, but I think that all of the special effects are very effective. Not, pun not intended, I guess. Um, and I think the zombie here, when the dad comes back to life, is great. So yeah, it looks very gross. I will say the only thing, and I know Creepshow did get a theatrical release, but I always try to keep this in mind when I think of older movies, where I'm like, people's TVs aren't as good as they are now, but like when the zombie talks, you can see like the I don't really know if I can explain what's going on, but basically instead of like having the mouth open, you can tell it's like a full mask that goes over the mouth. And so when he talks, the mouth opens, but you can just see that like the mask is just painted black right there. And I'm like, is that a fault of like, modern hardware? Like maybe that was something that like back in the day you wouldn't have even noticed because, you're watching this on an old TV or I don't know, an old theater screen, whatever. Gotta take into account VHS stuff. I don't know. But that was like the one thing that was like, oh, that doesn't really look great. Especially when it's like a close up of the zombie's face when he talks, and it's like, oh, you can definitely tell that that guy doesn't have a mouth, and it's just like Spider-Man talking or something. Uh, yeah, that's the one thing that kind of sucks. Um, well, actually, that whole story is not very good. Um, so, yeah, that one's definitely the weakest one. There's something like that in the Tales from the Crypt movie, but I think it's way more effective there because that story is about like an old real estate businessman who basically like it's honestly horrible because he like wants this plot of land and there's this guy there and he's just like an all-around great guy. Like he is like friends with all of the like young kids and he like gives them treats and toys and stuff. Like everything he's doing is in service of other people, and it's just like he just seems like a really great wholesome guy. And like I think the greedy real estate guy like tries to like starts a rumor that he's like a pedophile, and it's just like it's like kind of it's so sad because then like all of the kids leave. I think he like kills his dog too, and then like eventually kills him, or maybe he kills himself. It's like it's so dark. It's so dark in that movie. So then when that guy comes back to life and kills the business guy, then it's like, okay, that feels good. That's like getting your just desserts because you we just saw how terrible you are. In this one, it's like, well, the dad who was killed was terrible. Like he was calling his daughter a bitch and like just like I don't know, like the very short scene we saw of him, he was acting like a total asshole. And I'm like, yeah, you probably did deserve to get got. And also, they brought up that he was like 140 years old, and then the great aunt was also 140 years old. That's just a little weird detail that I'm like, why did you age them up that much? Where it's like beyond humanly possible to live that long. Is that implying some sort of supernatural? That almost feels like a Lovecraft thing, where like someone's alive for 200 years, and it's because there's this cosmic evil that's under the house, but they don't really bring it up. I guess the only supernatural thing is that the guy comes out of his grave and starts killing people, but I don't know. That doesn't really seem connected. Especially since this old lady has been doing this for like years and he only just did it now. You would think he would do that the first time, but I don't know. Anyways, the next one is the one that stars Stephen King, and this one I thought was pretty good, but oh, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and the elephant is Stephen King's acting, because this is a story where an old hillbilly bumpkin, a meteor lands in his backyard, and the hillbilly played by Stephen King is like, I'm gonna take this meteor to the university and they're gonna pay me 200 smackaroos for this meteor that landed in my house, and I'm gonna be rich. And so, you know, he he tries to pick up the meteor and stick it in a bucket so that he could take it, but it's too hot. So he's like, smart guy, takes a bucket of water and pours it on the meteor, and the meteor breaks open. And inside is like fluorescent blue liquid, like a lava lamp blue liquid or something. And for some reason, Stephen King's character is just like, oh, well, whatever. I'm just going to pick it up, pour that blue liquid into the soil, and then just keep the meteor pieces in a bucket. And so then basically the story is just like, basically the meteor is a plant. It's a I don't really know what it is. It's basically a thing that starts a bunch of plants, and anything that it comes in contact with like turns into plants. So over the course of the story, Stephen King, it starts with like a couple of green patches on his fingers, but then like as hours pass, more patches start showing up until eventually he just turns into a giant plant monster. And I guess that's honestly kind of creepy. And it's a very kind of effective thing. On paper, I will say. Stephen King, it's so he's very over the top, which I guess is fine, but I don't think it totally works with like the body horror aspect of it completely, because it's like, well, like you kind of did this to yourself, guy. Like, I don't know. I feel like I was pretty positive on this movie, but as I'm talking about it, I'm like, some of this just doesn't make any sense and doesn't really feel motivated really well. Um, I don't know. It's fine. I will say it's pretty gnarly. It's like body horror watching him like slowly turn into a plant monster, and that's kind of freaky. Um, Especially like, I don't know. There's like moments where like you're- I'll just say the end where like he turns into a plant monster, and then he like his last resort is shooting his head off with a shotgun. And I will say that's maybe the best special effect in the whole movie, because it's like a guy in a suit. Like you can definitely tell it's like a guy in a ghillie suit or something. But then when they shoot the head, it like looks real. It looks like they actually shot some guy or whatever, some plant monster's head off, because there's like no blood and it's just like all plants. And I'm like, that's kind of crazy. I don't really know how they did that. I would be interested to see. Um, but I do know that George Romero, they did shoot guns on set back in the day. Famously, in Dawn of the Dead, there's a head explosion and there was just a dummy filled with meat, and then they just shot a shotgun at it. And that's how you get a head explosion, I guess. So My guess is that that was probably a real shotgun. I just don't know how they did it. It's kind of crazy. um, but yeah, I think that that one, I think that story specifically is like kind of the black sheep among like fans of the movie. That is like most people's least favorite. Um, and I get it. I don't think it's my least favorite. I think my least favorite is the first one. But I think it's weird. It feels a little out of place. But I think it's pretty good and pretty effective at what it's trying to do. So whatever, go off, King.
Get it?
Get it? Anyways, the next one is 40 minutes long. It's 1/3 of the runtime of this movie. Um, this one is this one's pretty good. Honestly, I think it's pretty good. Basically, there's two dudes that are college professors. One dude, his wife died, and he's very sad, and he likes chilling with his friend, the other professor guy. But that dude has a wife. Not only that, he has a wife that sucks, and everybody hates her, including him. And he basically just dreams and fantasizes about murdering his wife at any way possible. He basically just, I don't know. There's a couple scenes where it's just like they're talking, and then he just like has a like a dream of him like blasting her head off, and then like everyone clapping. Which I honestly thought that that like really happened because there was like no red lights or anything, and I'm like, is this real? Did did he just blast her head off? And then everyone started clapping. But no, unfortunately, that was just a little a dream of his. But basically, the crux of the story is, wifeless dude basically finds a crate under the stairs of his university. I don't ask me how no one found it. Apparently, it had been there at least. The crate was from the late 1800s. It was like an Arctic expedition, 1890 something. And I guess someone just stuck it under the stairs of this university building, and he finds it and opens it up. And wouldn't you know it, there's a big Yeti, some sort of creature in there. And it goes on a little bit of a rampage. And luckily, wifeless professor makes it out, tells uh, professor who wants to murder his wife about it. And he's like, oh, that's very interesting. That almost sounds like a perfect way to murder my bitch wife. And so, wouldn't you know it, that's what he does. And so, that's the crux of the short. So he's like, I don't want to be married anymore. I just want to play chess with my pal. And so he murders his wife. And it's very nice. I guess.
The end.
The end. That's really the end of the story. Well, actually, the end of the story is because he's like, well, I killed my wife. And he was telling his buddy, he's like, I killed my wife and I fed her to a Yeti monster. And then I locked up that crate. The Yeti was in it. And I locked it up, drove it on over to the quarry, which I that's interesting. That there's a parallel because something gets dropped off at the quarry and Trick or Treat too, but we'll get there. And he drops the crate into the quarry, and he's at the quarry, I guess, like is like a lake now, I guess, essentially. And so he's like, well, what do you mean? Are you sure that the Yeti's dead? And he's like, oh, I'm sure. I locked up that crate, and it's at the bottom of the quarry, and it's drowned. And wouldn't you know it, the short ends with just like a shot of the lake, and then we see the eyes like it's escaped. I'm like, oh no, I just wanted those very nice professors that just kind of committed murder on 3 people to get away with it, but nope, the evil Yeti's coming back for revenge. But I guess that'll happen in Creepshow 2 or the Creepshow show. I have not seen either of those, and I frankly don't really want to. because I don't think I don't think George Romero is involved at all. So I don't really care. So that's that story. I think that one was pretty good. Uh, it's fine. I just think that the last two stories are really, really good. So it's like, and that one, it is really long. It feels like it's 40 minutes. Because it's just like, okay, I get it. She's a bitch wife. I understand. She's the old ball and chain. This dude just wants to play chess with the boys because he's an intellectual, and this dumb broad is getting in the way. It's like I understand. Uh, and so yeah, it's fine. The fourth one is great. This one has our good friend Leslie Nielsen. I think this was after Airplane, but before Leslie Nielsen was in every single stupid comedy movie that was like a B movie from the 80s. Um, Leslie Nielsen is great, just in general. I think I think most people probably know him now as a comedy guy from being in a bunch of Zucker movies like Airplane or Naked Gun, stuff like that. And he's very, very good in that, but he was actually like a leading man in the 50s and 60s, maybe even the 40s. He was the lead in Fantastic Planet, which is a movie that no one has seen, but everyone has seen the poster. So if you look up Fantastic Planet, I guarantee that you've seen that poster. It's like one of the most famous sci-fi posters of all time. I think maybe a comparable star would be like, actually, like a comparable arc, even though it's like way shorter, is like Chris Hemsworth, because Chris Hemsworth in like the early 2010s and like late 2000s was like, oh, he's a big beefy action guy. He's a leading man. He has a little bit of charisma, but we mostly just want him in our movie because he has muscles and he'll punch things really hard. And then, like, as his career kind of kept going, I think people in the industry realized, oh, he's really funny. So then they started, like, that's why Thor kind of became more of a comedic character. And then he started getting cast in straight up comedies, like the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, which is probably the best movie I've ever seen. So yeah, I think that that's kind of comparable, where Leslie Nielsen was like a kind of straight leading man in the 50s and 60s. And then after Airplane and Naked Gun, then he kind of became a comedy icon. But this this one, not necessarily a comedy role. In fact, Leslie Nielsen is playing one of the most evil people I've ever seen on screen. And we will get into it. But it also stars Ted Danson, everybody's favorite star of Tim and Eric, awesome show, where he plays Little Dancing Man from the episode of the Terry Green Machine, which is probably my favorite episode of Tim and Eric. That's really the only thing I know Ted Danson from. That's not true. I know him from Cheers and other things, but this was before Cheers. So Ted Danson, this is like right before he kind of blew up. It's kind of interesting in that way, where this movie has Ed Harris, Ted Danson, and Leslie Nielsen, who all would have their careers dramatically shift within the next couple of years. Kind of interesting. But Lil Dancing Man, he is married to a lady, and that lady was married to Leslie Nielsen. Don't ask, because Ted Danson is like in his maybe his early 30s in this movie. Leslie Nielsen is at least in his 60s, probably in this movie. So don't ask. Don't ask how one lady could be married to both, and how that lady can be 30 around Ted Danson's age. Don't ask. I don't want to know. I don't want to know how long ago she was married to Leslie Nielsen. I don't really think anyone else wants to see that either. So yeah, basically Leslie Nielsen is he basically kidnaps Ted Danson, and he's like, "I've kidnapped your wife. you should come with me to the beach. I want to take you to my private island. And Ted Danson's like, okay, I will do that. And so they go to his private island, and on the private island, on the beach, there's a hole in the ground. And Leslie Nielsen says, hey, Ted Danson, you should jump in that hole. And Ted Danson says, no. And so then Leslie Nielsen pulls out a gun and says, you have to jump in the hole now. And so Ted Danson jumps in the hole. And then he starts covering himself up with sand until he is buried just to his head. And Leslie Nielsen is like, haha, you fell for my ultimate trap. Now we're just going to wait for the tide to roll in. And Ted Danson says, you liar, coward. I thought you said that I was going to see my wife if you drove me to your private island and buried me in the sand and the beach. And Leslie Nielsen said, ah, yes, I forgot about that. Let me get my Ford F-150 with the longest VHS and TV cords that anyone has ever seen ever. They are at least half a mile long, TV cords. Frankly, I wish I had TV cords that were that long. Someone should make that specifically for me and have them not be $200. I want a $10 half a mile long cord. If someone could make that, that would be great. Probably on AliExpress. But Leslie Nielsen, I guess, was ahead of the curve, and he has those hooked up to his Ford F-150. He has them on giant spools, and then he's like, "Oh, Ted Danson, let me let me play you a nice home video I have." And so then he plops this old CRT TV that's plugged into a VHS player that's plugged into his Ford F-150 that is assumedly plugged into his house on his private island, which is half a mile away at least. And then he's on the TV is Ted Danson's wife, who is also buried up to her head on a beach, but she's buried a little farther up the beach than Ted Danson is, so he didn't see her. And tide is coming in. So Leslie Nielsen hits record on his VHS player and then just drives back to his house and then sits in his throne and watches. He watches Ted Danson watch his wife drown. And then he watches Ted Danson drown on the beach. And it is the saddest thing. It is horrible. It's like watching torture, and it's maniacal. It's honest. It's why I say he's so evil. And then he's just watching this happen, and he's laughing and drinking whiskey. It's like, it's comical. It's so over the top how evil Leslie Nielsen is. But wouldn't you know it, he gets his just desserts, because just like the birthday cake or Father's Day cake or whatever, Ted Danson and Lady come back to life and they murder Leslie Nielsen. But what's kind of interesting is that they could have just made them like zombies, make them look pretty similar, but they look like fish zombies. Like, I don't really know how to explain it. They have like scales and there's like seaweed all over them. I think they, those Minecraft zombies that swim, whatever they're called, the new ones, swimmers, probably.
Swimmers.
I think they're called swimmers. That's what I imagine they look like. So picture that, but not a block, and make it look like Ted Danson. That's what you should picture in your mind. And they murder Leslie Nielsen. But the best thing is that they roll up and they're like, "We need to kill you, Leslie Nielsen. We're gonna bury you on the beach." And Leslie Nielsen has this like shit-eating grin. Like, he is this like smirk. He's like, I got the ultimate trick up my sleeve. And he pulls out his gun and shoots them. And then it does nothing. And then he just like keeps trying. And it's like, you're shooting them in the head. You've shot them in the head multiple times and nothing's happening. Which, by the way, the like special effect of him shooting them in the head is amazing, because it's like, it's so gross. Like when he shoots them in the head, it's like not blood. It's like, it's so watery. Like, it's not normal blood viscosity. It's like just it's like black water, like Flint, Michigan water shooting out of the guy's head. And it's so gross, but it looks great. So yeah, that's definitely the you know the best part about this short is the special effects. But then they bury Leslie Nielsen out on the beach, and then he just starts screaming. And he's like, I can hold my breath for a long time. I can hold my breath for a long time. And then the tide comes in and he probably drowns. Um, and that was the moment that I was watching the movie and I was laughing and drinking whiskey. So I guess it kind of came full circle in that way. If you think about it, I'm really kind of a character in this film, which is special. Anyways, the last short is about an old dude who lives in uh, he's a germaphobe and he's a rich businessman, evil business, and he's so rich he has a penthouse in big city, and that penthouse is germ free, and it's spotless, and it's very very clean, and he likes yelling at different I guess people who work in the office or whatever. And he's just yelling at them, being like, "Oh, I found a cockroach. Send an exterminator up." If I remember right, the exterminator they send up is Frank Ziti. If I remember right. I don't remember. Frank Ziti's in here somewhere. I just don't remember who he plays. I don't remember what story he's in, but I think he's the exterminator. But he finds a cockroach, and then he's like, gross. So he steps on it and sprays it, and then he throws it down his like garbage chute he has next to his desk, which honestly is awesome. I wish I was rich enough to have like a garbage chute next to my desk. It's like a cup holder, which they kept getting these like insert shots whenever he put something down there that was like a close up and we saw the thing go down and then like we heard like the grinding noise. It's like a garbage disposal or something. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is a clear setup for at some point someone's going to break in here and then he's going to shove businessman's hand down the garbage chute and then it's going to chop his hand all up. Like that's a clear setup and that doesn't happen. So I guess it's called subverting your expectations and it's good, I guess. So yeah, businessman finds more cockroaches, and then it becomes like really, really gross. Where like it starts off and there's just like a couple of them, but it does kind of play into that like innate fear that I think pretty much everyone has of like finding just like walking around your apartment or your place or house, whatever, and then just like you just see a cockroach scurry across the floor, and you're just like, oh shit, because that makes you feel all gross, makes your space just feel dirty. And so it does really play into that. It's obviously heightened because the dude's like a germaphobe, living like Chuck from Better Call Saul or something. Um, but yeah, but then it like gets to the point where like he, oh, it's like they're like crawling out of the like his bath, like the drain in his bath and out of his sink, and then like he opens his fridge and his entire fridge is like coated in cockroaches. It like gets to the point where like he like is covered in cockroaches, and it's like I don't. You would have to pay me so much money to to be in that room because it is gross, and it was like before CGI because you do that now and it would just be a bunch of CG bugs, but they really pumped that room full of cockroaches, and it's so gross. Um, but I think it is kind of implied that like it's all in his head. And this is kind of like we're seeing his like whatever germophobia like visualized. We're seeing what he's seeing. He might even be like schizophrenic or having some sort of hallucinations. Because like at some point, like the office managers or whatever are just like, yeah, I bet. You said that you had cockroaches like a couple weeks ago. We didn't see anything. And I think that's kind of like a little thing where it's like, oh, we're seeing it's all in his head. Um, but honestly, I kind of wish it wasn't because like he's kind of evil, uh, almost to the extent that Leslie Nielsen is, but it's just like business evil. if that makes any sense. Where there's like evil like Leslie Nielsen, which is just like torturous and maniacal, but then this dude is just like, haha, tear down that orphanage to make way for big business parking lot for my supermarket. And it's just like, okay, if it's like played to that extent, or it's like, well, that's just kind of unrealistic. There's ways to like show corporate greed in like a realistic way, and just doing it like that's just like, okay, whatever. Not realistic. Nobody is just like that comically evil. Or at least like just like, hey, assistant, be bad. I want my business to be evil. Oh no, cockroaches. It's just like, okay, that feels kind of played out, but it's effective and how it's executed. So that's it. That's Creepshow. My favorite one is Leslie Nielsen torturing Ted Danson. My least favorite one is Ed Harris dancing and then a zombie kills him. Overall, I think the movie is great. I think it's very, very effective. I think in general, I'm not a huge fan of horror anthologies. I think horror is a genre that you really need to sit in. In general, I really like, long narratives. You have one big threat. I don't really think that the suspense and, the true horror is really allowed you're allowed to really experience it. It doesn't really build up in a like short 15-minute thing. So I think in general, they're kind of ineffective means of delivering horror. But I do think that this one is about as good as a horror anthology can be in my eyes. So yeah, good job, Creepshow. Good job, George Romero. Next week, we're going to be talking about Martin. So stay tuned. And other vampire movies, probably, because George Romero made a vampire movie, and we'll talk about it next time. But let's compare it to everyone's favorite horror anthology, Trick or Treat. This is a horror anthology similar to Creepshow. Doesn't really have a wraparound segment. In fact, it's barely a horror anthology. Like, I think it's kind of stretching the definition of horror anthology. Or at least it's very different from all of the other horror anthologies I've seen, where it's just like story, end of story, story, end of story. And it's just like very clear cut. There's clear divisions between stories, and it's just like we are experiencing all of these different shows, one after the other. Trick or Treat is very different in that we're kind of cutting between all of the stories at once. So it kind of doesn't really feel like an anthology. So I don't really know. It's interesting. I really liked it. I thought it was very well done. But it's just like, I don't really know if it's I don't know. It's a gray area, I guess. It feels more like a TV show where like in TV land, it'll be like your A plot and your B plot. But it kind of feels like that this is like a movie of like A, B, D, or C, D plots. And we're just kind of like cutting between them as we're going. I don't know. It's a very interesting structure. And it does kind of alleviate that problem that I just brought up with horror anthologies because, well, we're kind of getting the climax of all of the stories at the same time, which would make sense in a story plot kind of way. If you were to plot the story map or whatever, the climax happens all at the same time. And so it's kind of effective where we're getting the rising tensions for all of the stories at the same time. And then we're getting the big spooky horror climax done at the same time. So I don't know. It's very interesting, very effective in that way. But I don't think any of the stories were really interesting to me. I think the most interesting one was the first one. And then I guess the third one, I guess I don't really know how to number these. Um, but basically the movie takes place in a somewhere in the New England area, and it's a town that takes Halloween traditions very seriously. And there's a little boy that is a ghost or a demon, and he enforces these traditions very, very heavily. I don't really know what they call him. Uh, I kind of wish that there were more trick or treat movies because, like, it's a really great horror mascot. Like, honestly, if they made more, like this little trick or treat boy could be up there with some of the greats. Honestly, um, they're really trying to make the Terrifier clown the next horror great icon, but we should make trick or treat guy the little baby goblin. I like the goblin. I don't really care about clown. Clown is overplayed, but a little goblin in a scarecrow costume, I think it's better. I think it's better. It's more recognizable, anyways. Anybody can be a clown. I don't know why I'm spending so much time on this trick or treat thing talking about Terrifier, a movie I've never seen and probably will never see because it looks disgusting, and I would never, I would never debase myself. Except I did watch all the Planet of the Apes movies, so and I did watch Space Chimps. So I guess I really am used to debasing myself in public. So maybe I'll watch Terrifier at some point, but I really don't think anyone would like my opinions on it. Um, so yeah, trick or treat, little goblin boy. There's a bunch of traditions, and the traditions are as follows: don't destroy pumpkin. Don't put out jack-o'-lantern before midnight on Hallows Eve. That is it. But we are supposed to really keep those in mind. And they really are like, this town is so traditional. This town has all sorts of pagan traditions. And those traditions are don't destroy pumpkins and don't put out jack-o'-lantern, which I'm not I'm super knowledgeable on pagan traditions. I don't think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that jack-o'-lanterns were really around when the pagans were really going ham. In the like 300 BCE. I don't or CE. I don't know. I don't get it. But it's fine. Don't think about it. But if you destroy a pumpkin, or if you put out a jack-o'-lantern, little goblin boy dressed up as a scarecrow is going to take a big old bite out of his lollipop and stab you with the lollipop. And that is awesome. It's great. I love the little goblin boy. I can't overstate how much I love the little goblin. Um, because he's so cute. It's like you can definitely tell it's like a 6-year-old kid that's just like running around killing people, and it's awesome. I love him. And there's a point where he takes his mask off. Or he doesn't take his mask off, it just kind of falls off. And he's like a little, I don't he's like a dinosaur or something. I don't know. He's so cute. I just love the little goblin. It's probably the best part about this movie because everything else is just kind of fine. But yeah, there's like a serial killer story, and then uh there's a bunch of like uh hot 20 something babes that are trying to lure guys to a party. Uh-oh, they're werewolves. Big surprise. Teenagers pull a nasty prank on someone who has mental challenges, and that one's really hard to watch, honestly. Um, that honestly, that one kind of deserves a special mention because that one's set up because they kind of like we see the whole backstory where it's like there, and it's great because like basically these teenagers is maybe giving off the wrong idea. I would say like tweens, because they really seem like they're like 11 or 12, maybe 13 at the oldest. Um, but it's great because they like all gather around and they tell like a campfire story, and it feels like a real campfire story, where it's like there was a bus that was for special needs kids, and the families of all of the special needs kids paid the bus driver to murder all of the children, which I guess maybe was a thing that would happen, but it's kind of insane. I couldn't believe that the movie was going that dark, where the bus driver murders a whole bus of special needs children, and he drives it to the quarry, probably the same quarry that the evil Yeti monster is buried in, and drops. Basically, the bus just falls off the quarry, and everyone dies. Not everyone. The bus driver doesn't die, but all the kids die. And so, oh, yeah. And then, so then they kind of tell the story, and it's really weird and like really sad. Like you can tell the kids are kind of shook up about it, especially like for some reason they're like, we need to get this girl to hang with us. And she's not okay. The film uses the term idiot savant. I don't think that is the politically correct term. I don't really know what the politically correct term is, but I doubt that it's that. But basically, she doesn't seem like she has all sorts of like, she seems a little socially awkward, but she also seems like insanely knowledgeable on some things. So I don't know. But basically, they take her to the quarry and then spook her by like pretending to be the zombies of the dead children. But then, wouldn't you know it, the dead children come back to life and then actually murder the children, which is awesome. You love to see children die in horror movies, or really just movies in general. That's like one thing that like most movies, you can't really show it. You can't show children die, which is probably for the best, you know. But I don't know. It definitely feels like, whoa. It's a real gut punch. Because like watching adults die is like, whatever. But when you watch a child die, that's true horror. This is why I should never make horror movies, because I would just fill it with terrible things that no one would ever want to see. But that's okay. And I feel like most times when you murder a child in movies, it makes your movie NC-17. So I honestly don't know how they got away with this. I mean, it's rated R, but I don't know. Kind of wild. But yeah, but then the last story is the best story because it's Brian Cox from Succession. And he's just like, he's an old Scrooge, a Halloween Scrooge, I guess. Basically just a Christian in the 80s, I guess. And he's like, bah humbug. I hate Halloween. I hate having to give candy to children. I just like spooking children and then stealing their candy. But you never steal candy from a child. And so then little goblin boy comes over and murders Brian. Does he murder Brian Cox? I don't think he murders Brian Cox, but it's like a 10-minute fight scene where little goblin boy is like, it's quite a fight. Honestly, it's very intense. It's like the last 10 minutes of Hereditary or something, or it's just like constantly horrific imagery, a lot of like violence and injuries. It's great. And then he takes his mask off and he's a little goblin. It's awesome. And then Brian Cox tells the little guy to fuck off. He doesn't, but I wish he did. But it's revealed after the little goblin boy. I don't remember if he murders Brian Cox. I think he does, though. Once he murders Brian Cox, it's revealed that Brian Cox is the bus driver the whole time that murdered all of those special needs children. So we're like, yay, little goblin boy. He murdered a serial killer, I guess. So actually, that's why I like Little Goblin Boy so much, because he really only murders people that deserve it, you know? Well, actually, I guess the movie starts and he murders someone for putting out a jack-o'-lantern before midnight, which I guess is a rule. That probably wasn't cool, but you know, good job for killing Brian Cox. Um, at least now he won't be able to sell the company to Waystar, so at least there's that. So, Trick or Treat, pretty good. I think it's not quite as good as Creepshow in my humble opinion, but I I I would watch a Trick or Treat too, and I don't know if they ever made that. I honestly, I kind of hope they didn't. Honestly, I feel like that would not be great, but I'm very glad that this came out, and I think it went straight to DVD because it was 2007, maybe straight to video stores. Honestly, kind of crazy. But the director of this movie, Michael Dougherty, went on to make Krampus and then Godzilla King of the Monsters, which that one I've not heard good things about, but Krampus is regarded as a Christmas classic. So it's probably good. I haven't seen it, but it's probably great. So I think the moral of the story is we need to have the little goblin boy in more movies. Frankly, we just need more goblins in general. Goblins are great. They're probably the best monster ever because they're just up to shenanigans all the time. And I guess technically this little guy's not a goblin. He doesn't really have ears. He doesn't really like gold. He doesn't really pull any tricks. So really he's not a goblin at all, but he's small. So that's why I think he's kind of a goblin. But he's so cool and cute, and I love him very much. I would have a little. I don't really keep plushes or figures or anything, but I would get a little figure of the little goblin, and then I would get a full body pillow of the cute little goblin boy, and then I would snuggle with him at night and recollect on all of the wonderful things he did for the world, like murder a serial killer and murder a random lady. So he's really great. I will say some of the stuff, like you can tell it's kind of with him specifically because he could kind of just like shows up. He gets his like flowers at the end and at the beginning, but then he just kind of is like wandering around town. And there's a lot of the shots of him like wandering around town that you can like tell are inspired by Halloween and Michael Myers, where it's just like him standing there and watching stuff happen. And then, eventually he acts out, but like it's just the watching and the waiting, the suspense. That's what creates a great atmosphere and what makes Little Goblin Boy a great horror villain. Way better than the Terrifier, who just chops up people into little bits and then feeds them to other people and just pulls intestines out and eats hearts and shoves livers down hot 20 somethings' throats and blah, blah, blah. Get that out of here. Get Little Goblin Boy in here. Little Goblin Boy gets a seat at the table. Terrifier Clown does not. So that's my opinion on all of that. This is a big debate that everyone's been having whether or not Goblin or Terrifier Clown gets to go on the Mount Rushmore of horror with Jason, Freddy, and Michael Myers. And those are really the only iconic horror mascots. That's it. It's great. Leatherface obviously doesn't get a seat at the table. Nobody likes Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and also the Ghostface Killer does not get on there because he's a rapper, doesn't even murder people. So why would you think that he would be on the horror Mount Rushmore? That doesn't make any sense. So that's my opinion. I just think that honestly, I'm gonna go out. This segment has probably gone on for too long, but I do think that the little goblin is better than. I'm gonna say he's better than Jason. I'll just say it. I don't care. There's only one Trick or Treat movie. They didn't ruin him, so that's more than you can say for the Friday the 13th franchise. So maybe it's better that we didn't get a Trick or Treat 2 and that Goblin didn't show up and more things because they didn't ruin him. and I can just remember him for the little goblin boy that he is. So that's my thought on Trick or Treat. Half of it was talking about the movie, and half of it was talking about goblins. So that's the sign of a great film. So that's my thoughts on all that. Yeah, next week, watch Martin. We're probably gonna watch other. I think Martin is like a depressing vampire movie where it like really digs into what it would be like to have to murder people and how. I don't know. I don't know much about it. I just know that it's like an underrated gem. At least that's what the kids say. So watch Martin. Well, we might watch Near Dark or something. I think that's a vampire movie that's depressing. So get ready to be sad about having to murder people next week. But that'll actually do it for me. I don't think I have anything else to say. I'm going to throw it on over to Babby for his segment of the show.
Wow. Okay. Week 2 of Halloween stuff and crazy October month. I do have to start in a really awful place, unfortunately.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Ka, uh, artist who I talked about a couple weeks ago, has unfortunately passed away today or a
Oh.
couple days ago. Um, yeah, this kind of came out of nowhere. There were some rumors a couple days ago, and then those were proven false yesterday, and now they were proven again today as there was an official post about it.
Oh.
So yeah, died at 52. I don't really have a lot to say about it, just because like I'm not going to act like I've known his discography or anything for long. I literally just listened to my first album of his like a month ago, and it is really, really, really fantastic. So I will obviously be going back, but I'm not going to do anything too crazy. Just wanted to mention it and pay respects. People who didn't know he was a firefighter, which is crazy.
Oh.
He was actually a first responder on 9/11, which is crazy.
Oh.
So the way the post is worded, it sounds like he might have died on the job, which obviously is a risk you take being a firefighter and a first responder. But we don't really know a lot of details. But yeah, just thought I would mention it because it's a big hit, and I hate when these things happen because it's the same cycle over and over again, unfortunately. But yeah, just wanted to mention it. But that is it there. Okay, news, things.
Oh.
The structure's gonna be a little bit different this week, just because usually I'll do like my Halloween one first, but it kind of mixes in with everything, so we'll save it for later. But news wise, we have a new Ethel Cain album coming. I'm so excited.
Oh boy.
Perverts
Oh
comes out
god.
January 8th of next year. Ooh, I'm excited. We get a first single, Punish, on November 1st. So November 1st is continuing to be stacked. Um, Super excited for this. Those have been longtime listeners to the podcast. I listened to Preacher's Daughter when it came out, and I didn't really get anything out of it. And then I revisited it like maybe half a year after that, and I'm like, I'm a dumb, stupid idiot because Preacher's Daughter is phenomenal. I just don't think I was in the right space for it at that time, but it is a phenomenal record. And she has released some great singles this year. Whether it be an American football cover or a 9-minute instrumental piano piece. She's been killing it this year so far. So very excited for this album. Definitely like this is probably going to be the first one of the new year besides that FKA Twigs one, but 2025 in January looks good so far. But yeah, that's there. I don't know if there was any singles I listened to this week. I think it was mainly albums. So we'll start with the Brat remix album. Or sorry,
Oh.
Brat, and it's completely different, but it's also still Brat, the remix album. Yeah, this came out this Friday. It has 16 remixes, and then of course the typical track list on the second disc.
Mm.
Kind of a deluxe, except there's already a deluxe out, so this is the remix, including the deluxe tracks. Crazy feature list on this thing. Robin Yunling, or Yunling.
Young
Why is that a
Ling.
hard name to song? Uh, BB Tricks, Ariana Grande, the 1975, John Hopkins, Troye Sivan, A.G. Cook, Addison Rae, Caroline Polachek, Blade, A.G. Cook again, Lord, The Japanese House, who is not Japanese and indeed a white man,
Lady.
Tinashe, Lady, oh, okay,
Japanese house is great.
Bonnie Bear, Shy Girl, and Billie Eilish. A wide cast of characters. Um, and how is it? I don't know how it is, honestly. The it's it's fun having a remix album that is truly a remix album. That these songs are truly remixed, and they are sometimes like you're unable to tell what the original is almost. Um, Completely new parts. She has new parts. I think to varying successes. 360 with Robin and Young Lean is pretty good. I enjoy it. Club Classics with BB Tricks is pretty great as well. That's more of just like a straight club remix, which is really great for a song like that. Sympathy is a Knife with Ariana Grande is okay. I don't know if Ariana Grande really fits on the style of music,
Mm.
but she's there. I might say Something Stupid featuring the 1975 is pretty awful. Um, they turned it into a really sad piano ballad with
Oh,
what's his face on top of it. Matthew Healy.
yeah.
Yeah, not great. I really don't like that track. It was I almost skipped it. Like it was really insufferable. um, Charlie kind of tries to save it at the end, but like turning that into like a sad piano ballad with just like this weird British guy on top of it and a person I don't really like to begin with is not really doing it for me. Um, I think it was a really weird vibe shift. Talk Talk with Troye Sivan is fine. Um, Von Dutch is cool. I don't like Addison Ray. I don't know why we keep trying to make Addison Ray a thing. Um, they don't really contribute anything at all. It's very you can tell like very out of place. Like the charisma Charlie has in this track is great, and Addison Ray brings none of it and kind of sours it a little bit. Um,
Addison Ray didn't bring anything to the track?
what?
This is
This is
shocking to
news.
me.
This is news. I don't know why people keep trying to put Addison Ray in things. Stop it.
Stop it.
Um, Caroline Polachek on Everything Is Romantic is phenomenal. I think this is the best remix on the thing. I think she was made for this song, and they both just do fantastic on it. Um, and part of like what makes the good songs really good is like they kind of recontextualize the track, like present day, after the album blew up way more than anybody really expected it to. So you get to kind of uh, see her difference in reaction and thoughts, which I think is really cool. I think that's a great thing to do on a remix album like this because, like, Charlie had a mainstream moment like 10 years ago. I mean, it was a completely different artist at that point, but then kind of fell back into, I don't want to say like, uh, still kind of a household name, but nothing where it was like, number one albums and all that thing. She got into the PC music scene and kind of rode that kind of wave and kind of pioneered that sound, which gave her a completely different fan base than what she had from like Sucker in 2014. Um, but yeah, it coming back to this now where it's like she has blown up in 2024 for this completely like the style that she and a whole bunch of other artists have really honed in on, and it's mainstream again now is like pretty crazy. Um, Rewind with Blade was cool. I think Blade did quite well on it. It's
Yeah.
the second thing I've heard Blade on. That's it though. I still don't know what a Blade album sounds like.
Coward.
Um, it feels like Bab Jab Core, but like good. Most of Bab Jab Core is good.
Yeah, I was like, wow, what a sneak diss.
You never know. Um, so I with AG Cook is good. I do love the updated lyrics on there, focusing on like the positives of her relationship with Sophie instead of the more like regretful things that the original So I had. I thought that was really great. Girl So Confusing with Lord, of course, great. Apple with Japanese House is pretty solid. I don't remember that one too much, honestly. Um, Mean Girls with Julian Casablancas is also awful.
What?
um, First of all, why is Julian Casablancas on Mean Girls? He is the singer of The Strokes. For
Uh-huh.
people who don't know, does not fit at all. Um,
And he's not
I
a
think he's
girl.
talking about like being divorced and sad and alone and having erectile dysfunction on this
Oh.
song, and it doesn't fit. I don't
No.
know why she put like 1975 and Julian Casablancas, and they both just sound really like pitiful on the songs that they're on. Brat is a fun record, especially Mean Girls, and like that's a great song. It was not doing it for me. I think about it all the time with Bon Iver is pretty sick though. I think this is a perfect track to put him on. Um, I think some people call that where it's like it's weird that you didn't put like a female artist on. I think about it all the time remix, just because of the subject matter of that song. I feel like it would make more sense. But Bon Iver did fantastic. You can tell it's a Bon Iver track too with the
Mm.
production, reminding me of like Beth Rest at some points with this weird kind of like soft rock influence in there. It turned out really great though. So that was a surprise. I was like, what's gonna happen with this? Because Bon Iver can definitely blend into all these different styles. He's done tons of production on hip hop records and things. So
Oh yeah.
that turned out really good. And then 365 with Shy Girl is also a banger. Like they made that song even more insane than it was, and it's great. And then of course the guest remix with Billie Eilish is the last track, and that's also great. So it's a pretty good remix record. I can't score it too high just because it's obviously not nearly as good as the main record, and I don't know if I'd listen to it again. But it's a fun little thing to go back on and just hear some reworked songs. And people don't do like full remix records like this ever anymore. So it was a fun kind of throwback to what was, 10 years ago. Um, she has another song coming out too, because this album has a remix of, I think, every single song plus the deluxe, except Hello Goodbye and Spring Breakers. So there is a Charlie and Kesha collab coming out, or it came out today for Spring Breakers. So now there's only one song left without a remix. Will she do it? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know if Hello Goodbye needs a remix. Honestly, I don't remember that one from the deluxe. Um, but yeah, pretty solid remix record. It's definitely a lot of fun and really bad at some points, but you know, whatever. Um, yeah, very good. Alrighty, other albums that came out this week. Let's talk about Elucid Revelator, new record. Been waiting for this one for a while. This is his first solo record on Fat Possum, which provides a little bit more of a publicity boost and everything than a Backwoods release would do. Same thing that happened with Diabetic Test Strips, so it makes sense that he's kind of doing his debut after this, and I think that kind of momentum really helped with this thing. Um, so this is a pretty crazy record. I was expecting it to be. The singles were pretty insane and off the wall. And the whole record is definitely not short of that. Um, yeah, this thing is phenomenal. I think this is what I've been finally waiting for Lucid to drop. Every time he drops a solo record, I'm like, it's good, but there's points where like it's not as good as it could be. I think he's in the very unique position where his voice is so commanding that the beat does not do enough to back him up, which is a really weird problem to have because that's usually does not happen with any hip hop artist. Um, but he has such a weird commanding like tone and inflection and everything that it can be very difficult to kind of find that merge of styles. But I think this record does it because it is abrasive. It is wild. There's switches out of nowhere. It's sound collage. It's hardcore. It's experimental. There's the second song on this thing is basically a metalcore song with a hip hop beat. Um, yeah, it's a really fantastic just collage of sound across 15 tracks. Um, the World of Dog or The World is Dog opens it. That's a phenomenal song. I love the live drums and things and that kind of drum and bass feel. Amazing. CCTV, yeah, full guitars and metal drums. Creatures on this as well. Uh, both do fantastic. It is weird. Your bearings get lost so much on this record. There's so many different style switches and everything, but all of them work really well. Uh, you can definitely see how much of a hand he had in Diabetic Test Strips just listening to this stuff because the production choices are just so weird and off the wall, but they just work. We still have this kind of hazy feel on a lot of these tracks, but other ones are so energetic and in your face and industrial. Um, he's gotten really good at refrains and hooks. The hooks on this thing are great and they're catchy. Um, I think the reason for the record and the reasoning behind it and everything. This is a theme for a lot of records coming out later this year. It's just like the world we're living in is so incredibly awful right now, and things are just terrible all around. Um, so how do we convey that in art? We had a very pointed one at Godspeed last week, which is phenomenal. But two of the albums I'm talking about this week are very much the same thing almost. Because this record kind of ranges from, you know, uh, Palestinian genocide, but also like just like increasing disparity at home and just how gray and bleak and everything is. The inflow of invasive technology. You have songs like RFID and CCTV on here. Um, and just the chaos of living now is kind of conveyed in this record really, really, really well. And it hits quite hard. Um, yeah, it bangs. There's so many great moments on it. The closer, especially Zigzag Zig, is something I would not have ever thought I had heard him doing. Um, it's like a refrain over like this kind of uh, I don't want to say dance, but it's got this groove to it, and the refrain he's doing is just fantastic. I don't know. The range on this is fantastic. It came out of nowhere as like I knew it was going to be good, but it is really, really, really solid. Um, Sneaks up there, probably top three hip hop albums of the year so far. I say so far as if there's a lot left, but uh, yeah, it's fantastic. If you're into this more abstract stuff, give it a listen, especially if you liked Arm& Hammer's record from last year. Because I think this is the Elucid album. This feels the most like him, where there's no creative anything in his way. He is a full expression of himself on this record, and he is an incredibly unique artist, and this kind of shows the best sides of that. Um, but yeah, check out Bad Pollen with Billy Woods. That's fantastic. I love Hush Puppies. That song is just really fun. And then Zigzag Zig, the closer, is just phenomenal as well. So yeah, definitely check it out. Don't miss it. I've been really interested in a Lucid solo career, and he does so amazing on the Arm& Hammer records. And I was just waiting for kind of his breakout album, and I think this is it. This sounds like the most complete, true form that he's taken so far. So brilliant, fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into our Halloween spooky slash new albums because I combined the segment this week just because there's a lot coming out still, and I listened to two metal albums this week, and they can both kind of fit in their own ways into the Halloween marathon. Um,
Hmm.
so the first one, this is Blood Incantation, Absolute Everywhere. Um, have not heard of actually. I haven't heard of this band, but I've seen their album covers before. Their one from 2019 is just really fun album cover. It's just an alien chilling with some freaking chemistry happening around them. Uh, it's cool. I love it. Um, but this new one, this is a lot of things. The genres that are listed on here is progressive death metal, space rock, Berlin school, whatever that is, and technical death metal. Um, it is 43 minutes. It's basically two gigantic songs split into three movements each. So there's six tracks. Um, it's a lot of fun. I think this is a really nice like beginner metal album. Um, Mainly because it switches between styles so much, and it is kind of all over the place in the best way possible. Um, the rhythm sections on here are phenomenal. It has a lot of callbacks to like more 80s and 90s metal where you have these kind of like soaring guitar solos and these epic kind of drum builds. Um, it's like cheesy but not in a way. I think it just captures the cliches from that era that people remember fondly. Um, but it's really spacey. It enters this kind of like more true metal zone. There is some kind of like screaming death metal lyrics. If that's not your thing, then that's not your thing. I don't mind it on this record. I think they fit quite well. Tangerine Dream is featured on the second track, which is crazy. Um, I don't know how that collab came to be, but Tangerine Dream does a lot of more ambient, spacey stuff, so it does make sense. The collab here, but this is definitely like a more spooky space exploration kind of metal record, which I have not really gotten into it. It's very cosmic sounding. Just the depths of space you get in this thing are really great. And then it gets really, really Pink Floydy at the end to a point where I would not be surprised if Pink Floyd took issue with this because
Oh,
it literally sounds like parts of Dark Side of the Moon almost exactly. I think they sampled part of that for one of the sections. So I'm like, this just sounds like Pink Floyd. But they put like this kind of they use the death metal tuning for it, so it's more like drop D, darker kind of tone to it, which is it's cool. I like it. Um, but yeah, it feels like an ode to a whole bunch of different styles. It's a lot of fun. I think it's extremely accessible. It's not really spooky or anything, but it's one of those like horror movies that isn't really scary, but the vibe is set and really nice. But yeah, it's really great. I think people are really enjoying it this year. It's not like the top thing I've listened to, but it is a really fun listen. And yeah, if you're not into metal and you wanted somewhere to kind of start, I think this is a really safe bet. Or if you're just more like classic, like 80s hair metal stoner type guy with a Pink Floyd banner in your room or something, this might be the perfect album for you. This might be the best thing you've ever heard, actually, if you fit that very specific criteria. So, which I feel like is more people than you'd like to think. So, but yeah, it's really great. It was a lot of fun. I missed it last week because this did come out last week. But there was no way I was fitting another album in last week. I already had my hands full with that. But yeah, really great. Check it out. Okay. The star of the show this week and the star of the Halloween marathon this week, I think it fit quite well. New chat pile. Cool World. This is their second album. God's Country came out in 2022. Made my top 10 for that year. And then this one's coming out, came out this week. This is the most October album I've ever heard, actually. It is disgusting and bleak and ugh, just filthy, and I love it. Um, this definitely it's definitely chat pile. Like the way it sounds and everything is very reminiscent of their first record. I think they are a little bit more honed in this time. Their first record had a lot of different little experiment things, and was more disturbing at parts than this record. Um, but this one definitely, I feel like they've really found their sound on this one. It just is so dreadful in the way that you want it to be. This incredibly sludgy. The bass on here is phenomenal. The guitar riffs are great. Um, it just really puts you in this awful mood, and that's exactly what I wanted with this record. Um, it's the same as the Elucid record in just terms of like subject matter being like the world is just awful right now, and this record I think more than the Elucid just acts as like a catharsis point of just letting all of that out. Um, it's yeah, when you really get into this thing and just listen loud, it really just kind of envelops you in this dread, um, and it's really phenomenal. Much like the Elucid record, the first track also has the word dog in it, which is also really a weird coincidence. That both the new albums I listened to this week have dog in the first song. But this is the first single I am dog now for the record. I did not like it as much as I do on the record, just because it's a weird opener. It definitely does not go as many places I was hoping that a lead single would. But that is fine because in the context of the album, it's great. Um, and then Shame, we have more, Palestinian genocide lyrics and just like how we live in this country where we can't even like get stuff for ourselves and we're sending money to blow up children and then we just have to watch it on social media while we still can't pay our bills and all that stuff. The chat pile, like even on their first record, just points out like the virality and awfulness of American living and just the milieu of how this country acts, and you're just supposed to just kind of like continue on with your life. I think this record just kicks it up a notch and just like, yeah, it's that, but the atmosphere also stays so consistently dark and dreadful that it just it really gets to you after you just like really sink into this thing. Um, Frownland is also, it just goes hard. Like some of these songs are just, the bass is so chunky and great. I love the vocals too. I feel like he's really honed in on like you either have this kind of like deadpan, really depressive kind of tone, or you get like full on screaming moments, and both work so well. Um, Funny Man was the third single. I don't think I talked about it. I did listen to this before the album came out because I was excited for it. But Funny Man is fantastic. Another one that just goes extremely hard. The drums on this are just like violent and crazy. Um, and then we have the I kind of twofer with camcorder and tape. Both are incredibly disturbing. Um, camcorder just being about like how we get to see just disaster and horror like every time we open our phones or anything. Like it's so accessible nowadays. Um, and just I think like the perverse like need to like not seek it out, but like you can't pull away from that kind of stuff. Especially like early internet with all like those horrible websites that were up and stuff. Like I think it's kind of getting at that. Um, and then tape was just like this tale of like going into an abandoned property and finding like videotapes of just like unexplainable horrors. It's such a just dreadful kind of vibe and atmosphere. But the energy they carry through it is just so good. The New World might be one of the best tracks. I think that the run from New World to Mask, I think, is just oh so good. This is where like the real catharsis of it comes out. Like these things just go so hard that it is just unbelievable. The feeling that kind of bubbles up in you. I imagine these concerts go really hard. Um, but this one is just like kind of taking the view of an indigenous person when colonizers come, which can be viewed in many different contexts in today's current time, and I think it takes on all of those contexts. Um, yeah, the fiery nature of this track is just fantastic. I think like people could be like all of this kind of blends together and sounds the same. It all carries very similar vibe, but I don't know the way that it kind of ebbs and flows when you get these more like spooky slower moments, and then like ones where you're just like faces getting blown off by just like how fiery these riffs and drums are. Um, it's a great combination. I think Mask best single that they put out. Mask is just maybe one of their best songs. It's just cut and dry, like amazing metal track. Um, the way the guitars are kind of shoegazy almost and creates this really nice just fuzz and wall of sound as it builds throughout the track is just phenomenal. Um, Milk of Human Kindness, crazy track name. I think it's PTSD kind of is the subject matter. Another like just eerie track. Um, and then No Way Out, a great closer. This is just ooh the the way it builds up to this final moment where it's just like the vocals are just like screaming and everything is just falling apart at the end of this thing. Um, Phenomenal closer, just about how like if you're born in a certain tax bracket or your parents are poor or whatever, like it's and just like American life in general, like it's there's no really like you can't escape it. You're thrust into this thing and you kind of just have to deal with it and cope with it however you will. Um, and just this no escape mantra that they have at the end is just haunting. So yeah, this record is phenomenal. I think it's slightly better than their debut. I think I like it a little bit more. They're both great, but I really do love the direction they went with this one. It feels very accurate to the time, which I feel like I'm always biased when it comes to like rating music of current years, where it's like I want something that like matches my feelings with the current day situation, whatever that's good or bad or whatever.
Sure.
I always gravitate to stuff like that. So, uh, yeah, it is phenomenal. I think it's getting all the love it deserves, and I don't know. I love this band. They're so good. Um, yeah, check it out if you're definitely into like heavier music or I don't know. I'm loving the sludge metal on this thing. It's just so good. But yeah, definitely more of a Halloween album too because it's not disturbing up front, but when you get into the lyrics and you just like really let these instrumentals take you, it's definitely a little bit of a ride and it's not that fun. So yeah, really great. And I think that's it for the week.
That's it?
That's it.
What the
4
heck?
albums. Yeah. Um, it doesn't stop though, because I think what do we have next week? There's one next week. We have Bon Iver next week.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, we'll be doing that on the channel, so stay
Of
tuned for that.
course.
Um, get a
Yeah,
little twofer, a special. And then we have Soccer Mommy after that, and then
absolutely.
November 1st is going to be another huge week because I have Mount Erie and The Cure.
Oof.
It never ends. Hopefully
Yeah.
December is dead because I'm gonna need time to like really get these things in order.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah,
I
we have
don't.
Father John Misty at the end of November too.
Yeah,
Ooh,
Mahashmashana,
yeah,
Mahashmashana.
Mahash Mashana.
Oh, I hope that's good.
Me too. I
I
mean,
don't.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, his last two have not been my favorite, so I don't know. But the one single was pretty good. But also, oh, what's that one song on Chloe? The single was good on that one. I can't remember what it's called though. Um, Funny Girl. I think it was Funny Girl.
Yeah.
That's a good song. Yeah, there was a couple of good songs on Chloe, but I don't know. We'll see.
I remember it being good, but then like after the reaction, I'm like, I don't need to listen to this again.
Yeah, it was okay.
It was too cliche in its era.
It's very. It was like it owed too much to the old. I think.
Yes.
Didn't quite have an identity of its own, but that's fine. I'm very excited for Mahasma Shasma.
I hope it's like a full mushroom trip of a record. I want him to get weirdo.
So the one single that was on the the greatest hits album, the I guess Time Just Makes Fools of Us All, the 8.5 minute, it's like a disco
Mhm.
song.
Oh,
So I don't know. I honestly have no idea what to expect with this album.
yeah.
A lot of
I am excited
long
about it though.
tracks.
Yeah, there's a lot of long tracks, which makes me excited.
Yeah. Only 8 tracks, but I think that the shortest one is 4 minutes and 17 seconds.
Yeah, it's a 50-minute album.
Yeah. I he has a lot to say, maybe. Or maybe not. I have no idea. I'm a little bit worried, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I have been listening to the Japanese house.
Perfect.
Yes. Okay, so I think I talked about this when I first listened to it. Her album from last year. In the end, it always does. It's on the surface, I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's about her experience of being in a throuple and then just like kind of watching that relationship deteriorate over the course of the album. And I'm like, well, that's a perspective that I have never heard before. I haven't really seen it represented in art, really. So I'm like, that's kind of an interesting perspective. I will say it's an interesting perspective, but it's just like pop music. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like that's like the most conductive way to do it, but also it's really, really catchy and great. So maybe it is the right way to do it. I don't know. But I've been going back to it recently. It's really, really great. Especially the first half. Nothing against the latter half, but it just kind of gets slow and sad once the relationship falls apart. I like it when it's fun and happy. So
Don't we all?
yeah. I would say at least listen to Touching Yourself. Very, very good song. It's a good introduction for the kind of vibe that the album goes for. And it's the lead single, most popular one, whatever.
You know how it is.
You know how it is, but I think it's pretty good. So check that out. I think it is on my wheel. Maybe not. I've also been spinning Desire, I Want to Turn Into You. What a great record.
Classic.
Is she, I thought I heard, well, I saw that she was with Hideo Kojima.
Yes.
Which I think is just kind of weird. But
I don't know. I feel like she could like put out a banger soundtrack.
I think she could. She could do the next Snake Eater.
She could.
I would like that. Yeah, I just kind of like, I'm like, yeah, I should throw that on. I'm like, man, I really forgot how like distinct her voice is. Like, isn't she like trained like a trained yodeler? So she has like that kind of inflection and how she does her runs and stuff.
Yeah, she's a human auto tune without needing auto tune.
Yeah, I remember. I think someone in our comment section sent that, and I always trust our comments. So
No, yeah, it's real. I watched the Tiny Desk performance, and she does it live.
that's nuts.
It's crazy.
Ah, she's great. I need to add Pang to my wheel because we need to
Yeah,
listen to
I
that.
think it's still on mine actually.
Yeah, I'll add it just so that we can double up.
Yes,
Same with Nick Drake. Nick Drake, by the way, for this Aaron West one that we just did, that was gonna be my good if I got a good.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, things didn't work out that way. And we
You
listened
haven't
to an
gotten a
album
good in
that
a while.
sucked. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
we'll get there eventually.
We'll get there. In a long enough timeline, we'll eventually listen to. Well, that's not even true. We won't listen to everything. If we could
That's a
live
bummer.
forever and then musical artists
Still wouldn't
stopped
listen to
making
everything.
music, then we could theoretically listen to everything.
It would still be impossible.
Well,
Like you reach a point where you listen to enough things that you start forgetting things, and then you don't even know. So then you got to go back to stuff again.
That's
if
true.
you really listen to everything.
Yeah, I know. I think about that with like movies too, and I know that like some people on like Letterboxd will just like say that they like watched a movie if they don't remember it, but I'm like, I can't say that I've ever watched G-Force, even though I know for a fact I saw that in theaters. I don't think I could tell you a single thing
I
about
got it for
G-Force.
Christmas, and I couldn't tell you anything about it. I watched it like 5 times, and I still can't recall anything.
Don't remember anything about it. So that would be what it would be like if we did music until we were 300 years old.
That's true. Although in our case, we're documenting every time we listen to something. So
That's true. That's true. But our thoughts are constantly changing.
it's true.
I don't even want to watch the Illinois video. I'm scared for the man I was when we first started the channel, because I'm
Yes,
pretty
that
sure
was
I
our,
said some negative things about some of those songs, and I don't want to hear
yeah, that
what
was
I
in our
said.
first 10 reactions, I think. So
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. So, same with Blonde. Like, I'm pretty sure I was mixed
ooh,
on
yeah.
like half of that
I
album.
never want to go back to that video.
Yeah, like nope.
It gets views though.
It
Which
does,
is
crazily
scary.
enough. Yeah, that's the life we lead. We're martyrs for the great populace.
A great comment section to make fun of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Stay tuned for our Yankee Hotel Foxtrot re-reaction coming next week.
I'm down. I love that album.
I don't want to do that again. Even if I like it, which I probably would at this point.
I think you would, yeah.
I don't. I'm scared. I'm too scared. That
I'll
was
put
our
it as a yikes.
that was our first like controversial video.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, everything else is pretty safe.
Yeah. And then people are like, "Oh, this Jerry guy really doesn't know what he's talking about."
We did Black MIDI very early.
That's surprising to me.
It is surprising.
I like that. Well, actually, I like Hellfire more than I like Schlagenheim.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. That's it for me. Bye.